Hello, and welcome. Welcome once again to the Secrets of the High Demand Coach podcast. And I am here with an absolutely high demand coach, and that is Mr. Eric Cruz. Eric is passionate about helping companies achieve their growth goals, and he's guided over 100 organizations to increase and sustainable profitability while simultaneously optimizing their operations and instituting elevated quality of life for their leadership teams. There's so much in there to unpack, Eric, and I can't wait to explore just what each of those elements mean. But before we get there, first, just welcome to the show. And I'd love to just start with your story. How'd you get into coaching and why did you ultimately make the leap?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I got into coaching. I'm a longtime member of a group called the Entrepreneurs Organization. I'm sure you've had a bunch of EOers associated with EOers. And I was the past president of the organization. I've been in that group for almost 17 years. So a big shout out to EO if people want to get involved in something. And I had some regular businesses, some non-coaching businesses that I've owned for years. I've owned a lot of service businesses, and I still do own some regular service businesses. And the companies that I worked with were scaling nationally. So EO, after I was president, said, "Can you help out some companies that are under the sub-$1 million mark, get them over the $1 million mark? Can you do that as a volunteer?" And I did that for years.
Wow.
I probably worked with 20, 25 CEOs as a volunteer. And then a couple of them said, "Can you help out more on a paid basis?" And I said, "Sure, I can take a few clients." And I started doing that maybe 10 years ago. And then I evolved and I became an EOS implementer, one of the first EOS implementers way back when in New England, 8 or 9 years ago. And I had no intention of growing a consulting business or coaching business, but I worked in the EOS world for years. EOS is a great system. And ultimately, we ended up leaving and founding our own consulting company because we were so focused on results. And we really do appreciate the value of an operating system, but we also want to be more accountable to the results that our clients get. So I kind of winded up here by accident. And I still have regular businesses. Actually, I have a partner. We own a commercial painting company that's scaling nationally right now. It almost made the Inc. 500 actually 2 years ago. So my world's about working with entrepreneurs. Our Cruise & Co. works with, I think we have 105 companies actively right now across the United States.
Wow.
My whole world's been about scaling entrepreneurs, but it came from helping them as a volunteer. And it all comes from the spirit of that I also am an entrepreneur. And I'm just humbled to be able to work with them, honestly.
Yeah.
It's a not easy space to be in.
Wow. That is absolutely the truth. So it was one of the questions as I was just looking through some of your website and materials ahead of this. One of the things that I noticed is how much entrepreneurial experience you have yourself. And how do you think that shapes your approach as a coach and consultant with your clients?
So first of all, I can't stand consultants. And I have a consulting company. So, and sometimes they can't stand me either. So I got to be careful. So I have a strong belief. Our firm focuses on small and medium-sized companies. So we focus on companies that are from $1 or $2 million usually in size, up to we work with companies that are up to $500 million. So, but we have focused. Our goal is to provide consulting services, finance services, whatever they need for consulting, to a market that typically cannot, really they can't afford it. So, for us, we're trying to scale into this whole thing and do this. And it's I don't even that's what inspires me to do it, and that's kind of how we ended up. And that's kind of the gist of it, really.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. One of the main reasons I started this podcast is because I get to travel across the country. I get to work with lots of CEOs and teach folks around the world. And one of the things that I noticed is that so many of them have had a bad coaching or consulting experience to the
Yeah.
extent of I'd say, hey, how many of you have had a coach or consultant in the past? And somewhere around 9 out of 10 hands would go up in the circles that I'm in. I say, how many of you had a bad coaching consulting experience? And about 9 out of 10 of those had a bad experience with a coach or consultant. And so, I don't want that to rag on the coaching consulting industry. In fact, the reason I started the podcast was to say, hey, this is what great coaches look like. So tell me a little bit about I would say what that means to you is like, I don't like consultants. I don't even like being one some days, but
Yeah.
how do we overcome that?
So you're getting around, some great questions here. So one, I am lucky, and I mean truly lucky. I just happen to be in the right place at the right time in a few different things. One, I have a great coach. So I was coached by somebody who was great for years. Um, and so I learned about the format of coaching from somebody who's phenomenal at it. And I was one of his earlier clients. Two, I'm still an entrepreneur. So and my companies are in the tens of millions of dollars. I've had 11,000 employees in the time I've been an entrepreneur.
Wow.
And I've been through it all. Extreme difficulties, extreme successes. And I think the reason that I don't like consultants is because they have a playbook. If they're good, hopefully they have a playbook. But you can end up in consulting if you're not good at what you're doing. And um, we got lucky. I was an EOS implementer, and all power to EOS. It's a great system. So if you're listening to using EOS, good for you. I know the scaling up people, so I know them quite well. I've been an EO forever. I own my own business. So I kind of we built an operating system in our company that was that takes a lot of the operational strength from EOS, a lot of the strategy from scaling up, and then applies it to the knowledge that we have from actually running companies.
Mhm.
And we have a core value of your business is our business. And so we catch ourselves, we call it quarterly meeting mindset. We try and get ourselves out of the mindset of we're in a room or even a conversation like this. And you're like, well, you want to say certain things. Like the answer is right people, right seats. And the answer is you want to do this. And I'm like, yeah, we lean into cliches too. Like I love cliches, but at some point we try and net it out to what would we actually do in this situation?
Right.
And when we apply that filter to it, it's usually a different answer. It's the playbook tells us this, and we have a huge elaborate system. We have an operating system that we help our clients with, and we rely on it. And we have we're kind of, we can be rigid on it, but we're only as rigid as we need to be realistic with the client we're talking to and their situation. So, you know, I say, hey, consultants, although I work with a bunch of them and I am one, I think the only way you should do this job is if you care almost as much about your clients as you do, or really as much about your own clients as you do your own business.
Yeah.
And most consultants don't do that. And they charge a lot of money and build scalable models. I appreciate it. My whole business is about scalable models. But I think the scalable model for us is what is this one client doing? Are they successful or not? Are we doing that 100 times? Yes, but we care about the one client and we watch all their metrics internally. So we judge our success based on revenue growth, profitability growth, and valuation. So we come up with the formulas for those things, and we have a consultant team of 11 people. If we don't think those numbers are going the right direction, we consider ourselves to be a failure. And we try and come up with whatever we need to do to help them succeed.
Yeah.
So, we're kind of like the anti-consultant in that way. And it's not easy. Our business proposition is not an easy one. But, we happen to be good at it. So I guess it works.
Yeah. Fantastic. What would you say is some of the most important work you're doing with your clients right now?
That's another great question. Important work. So, well, it goes back to a question you might ask me soon, which is around kind of what lessons people should be learning and things they should be doing. So, like I said, I do have a great coach. So we have tons and tons of things we focus on in the client's business. We focus on strategy, we focus on people, we focus on operations, we focus on finance. But the consultant's cheat sheet, in my opinion, or a coach's cheat sheet, is that 90% of the game is getting the right people in the right seats. Back to that cliche. So when we lean into it and we're overcomplicating things, I would say the most important thing we're trying to do, especially at the senior leadership level, if we're working, depending on the size of the firm, is we're trying to make sure they have the right people, the right seats, but not only the right people, the right seats, the right people, the right seats for where they are as an organization at that time. And that's a big thing. People say, well, like that cliche from Jim Collins gets a lot of traction because it's great. But right people, right seats it's more important. It's right people, right seats for where you are as a business at this very moment. And then we help them map out, this is what it looks like right now, Q1 2023. What should that look like in Q2 by Q2 2024? It should look like this. So we give people a vision for how people can accelerate their business, which is not easy to do. But we don't, our businesses are scaling, they're growing. So they get stuck a lot with these people, and they can't figure out a map to get to the next location. And I say, well, how long can this person make it in this role? Maybe another $2 million. Okay. Then we got to be careful we don't try and push it to $4 million, because we're going to get over our skis there.
Yeah.
But that's probably the most important work that we do, I would say.
Yeah. I just could not agree more with that concept, because where right people, right seats tends to drive me crazy is that we think of it in absolutes. This is a good person or a bad person.
Bingo.
This is the right person or the wrong person, and it creates really, really, lousy team dynamics and awkward conversations when it's growing, because it's like, well, if we said they were the right person back then, why is it that they're not the right person? Oh, because they're bad somehow, right? That tends to be one of the few tools we have left to explain it if we don't embrace this idea of when. So I love that you identified that. I want to dig in a little bit deeper, because you're doing this a lot for clients, and it's a really, really powerful principle. What would you say are some of the patterns or principles that you use to help clients identify what's right for right now?
Huh. This is probably not your first podcast, is it? I'm betting it's not. That's a great question. All right. So that's a hard question. Don't you have anything else easier, like first thing ever happened to me in my lifetime or something? All right. So one, you got to figure out. That's a big question. And I'm going to give you the micro version, in our opinion. One, you got to figure out what kind of business this actually is. Like, so how does this business actually scale? Is it a business that scales through hiring reps to sell this product? Is it an organic business? Is it a referral business? Like, what's the engine that makes this business grow? And you got to kind of think about that. So some businesses grow off referrals, some business grows off marketing and content. Some people grow off product differentiation. Some people grow off hiring sales reps. There's all these different growth models that exist out there. So you got to figure out what your growth engine is, because you have to have the right people in those seats that are heavy on those things that drive growth. Now, that can look like at a smaller company, a inexpensive biz dev hire. God love her. People ask how we grow our commercial painting business so large, because we hired this amazing woman named Joanne. She'll listen to this podcast and she'll love this. She's one of the best biz devers I've ever met. But she's been pivotal in helping us grow our company. People think, well, you're a huge company. How could that one person be so pivotal? Because she accelerated our growth engine, and she was the right hire we needed at that time. So you got to figure out what your growth model is. What are your points that are going to make your company grow? And then make sure you have the level of talent needed to grow you. Ideally, I pick 3 years out. So ideally, you can hire, if you map out your 3-year vision, ideally this person you're hiring can get you to 3 years. So if you're at 2 million, you're trying to get to say 4 million in 3 years. I would say, can they get you to 4 million? No. How far can they get you? 3 million? Okay. Well, then let's try and map out what that next person looks like. And if it's a marketing person, if it's a market driven thing and the marketer's not going to make it, I'm going to say, look, you're going to have to go heavy on price tag, on a price point on this marketing seat, because that's how your business accelerates.
Yes.
If it's a referral type business, I'm going to probably say you're going to have to go heavy on quality control and ops, and you're going to want to spend a lot of money in that seat. And then as it scales, it really gets down to the typical C-suite. As you start getting bigger, you got to have a head of finance, you got to have a head of sales, and you got to have a head of ops, and then you got to have a president or general manager or whatever you're calling it, an integrator if you're an EOS person. But you need to have somebody to do that. But in the early days, though, you only have a limited amount of funds. So I would invest first. I get this question a lot. First, I would invest in things that are going to make you money. And then I would also make sure you cover operational quality at the same time, at the cheapest level you can afford, that keeps the quality high. That's how we do it.
Yeah. Oh, that is so good. There's so much wisdom in that for folks. And what it does, I think, there's two big things that it does. It just relieves the pressure for folks who are trying to overhire too soon, right? Because if you hear you got to have A players, there's this immense pressure on, especially small businesses, those $1 million, sub-$1 million, to compete with outrageous salaries relative to what they could afford, right? And so the specificity of that last comment is incredible. And it's going to be really helpful if you're listening, rewind and listen to that again, because it's really great advice. Second thing about that is, a lot of different tools and platforms will talk about an org chart or an accountability chart or fill in the blank, whatever you want to call it. And I've found a lot of people will resist that at first because it feels like, why are we doing that? It's kind of like your P&L to an extent. It just explains what happened in the past. But what you're talking about is using an org chart as a planning tool. And it's an absolute game changer.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, we focus on people, operations, finance, and strategy. So, if we had a bunch of hours, I could probably talk to you about all this stuff and you'd probably give me a lot of wisdom that you've heard from all these people. But for the people part, in my opinion, 90% of the game is people. Even if you're a product company, like you have to have somebody who's going to be innovative at product. So your company, to the degree that you're able to make the necessary staffing changes at the right points in your company as it grows, in my opinion, is that almost in direct relation to the ability that you are going to be able to hit your growth targets. Now, that's a very difficult statement because what it means is that you have to be able to have very difficult conversations. You have to often invest ahead of where you are. Sometimes you have to bring in fractional talent, but you have to have a both extremely compassionate and caring personality. You have to love your team, and you have to be able to maneuver people from into seats where they sit, and they may last for 10, 20 years. It's possible. But if they get to their ceiling, you have to then find the person that can do that role for the next couple of years and then elegantly move that next person into maybe the reporting into that person. And if you don't master that art, your business won't grow and your team will get cheated out of career development, honestly. So people say, well, I love that person. I say, well, how much? You're blocking their career because, they don't know any more than they're not going to learn here. And so when you find amazing talent as you grow, the people that initially resisted it always say the same thing, which is, I'm so thankful you hired that person. I've kept my job. They end up making more money because now they're more leveraged, they're better leveraged, and they have a better path. So, but it's like I don't like consultants, me being one of them, because that's hard. So when we say that, we know like that's not easy. Like this person's been 5 years, and they say, well, that person's been here 5 years. And I say, well, that's terrible. But that fact does not change this fact. And I think that we still need to maneuver around that organization to do that. So we do map it out intentionally. And then if a company says, well, I know that we need to make that change, but we're not comfortable, we want to wait 9 months, we say, no problem. 9 months is better than never. So then we map that out and we get agreement on that. And sometimes it helps people to say, I got to prepare the company for that move. How about I do it in 9 months? Great. Let's put it in the map for 9 months out. And, and that's how we do it. So we look at companies as this progression. And if people can stay in the seats for a long time, that's amazing. But generally speaking, if you do this right, everybody wins in the organization if you do it right. And if you don't do it right, everybody in the organization loses. And I can't tell you this enough. And I do this myself in my own organization. To the degree that you leave the wrong person in a seat, that part of the business generally stops completely. And if you have the rest of the business accelerating the right level, you really can create problems. So, that's my experience on that.
Yeah. I made that mistake more times than I can count.
Yeah, me too.
And I would say if you look at every big kind of inflection point in a business, it is at least one or two people decisions that's in between you and that. You can bring in a consultant, you can teach strategies and tactics until you're blue in the face. But if you don't have the right people to execute on those, then they're just not going to stick if they happen at all.
And that's the broad strokes. I mean, there's 1,000 things that are more to it. They're additional to that, but that one will definitely stop you. There's no question about that.
Yeah. And for those of you listening, I just want to pause for a second and say what Eric has done so far in this conversation. I've asked him about 4 or 5 questions that each are about an hour-long answer. And he's done all of this in about 15, 20 minutes. So just a masterful articulation of just some really, really profound topics. And Eric, I want to do this to you one more time. I did give you a heads up about this one, and so we'll make it a little easier. But I love to ask every one of my guests this one question, and that is, what's the biggest secret that you wish wasn't a secret at all? What's that one thing that you wish everybody listening today knew?
So this is a big one, and many firms do know this. I want to be careful how I say this. This is also a reflection on me, because I have done what I'm about to say, in my opinion, is a big secret. I did not likely even get right until maybe I'm 52, probably when I was late 30s to 40s. And I have no regrets in my life around anything. But the one thing I would say I wish I'd done more of my entire career is being more strategic about things. Now, here's what I mean by that. So you can work with operating systems to focus on operations, and you can be an EO, or Vistage, whatever group you're in. And a lot of stuff is about operations. It's about how do you run a better business. Right people, right seats is operations, really. But ultimately, when we work with a company, I ask them, assuming everything was fixed, which we can usually fix a company in a year and a half to 2 years. We can usually fix it. That won't make you grow necessarily. It might help. It might help you to do better. But companies that everybody idolizes, a lot of them are not even that well run, honestly. They're just have a thing that is sold because they thought of it. And people think, well, Steve Jobs is a great entrepreneur. I would say Steve Jobs is an innovative entrepreneur, and he was extremely intelligent. But I don't think he read books about how to run a better company. I don't think that's in his bookshelf, right? He's not watching any of this stuff. Bill Gates, I don't think he doesn't even like people, right? He built a great machine. So I think there's a confusion that if you're going to go in and fix the operations of your business, that you're going to have this great home run. And I do agree that's extremely important, and we focus on it big time. But we then focus on, if we're trying to go from $3 million to $6 million, or from $6 million to $30 million, once we get operationally fixed up, what strategies do we need to be employing? What is our actual strategy into the market? What's going to give us no friction into the market? And that's not an easy question, because you have to have addressable market. You have to make sure that what you're selling is needed by people. And you got to do your homework on that, which nobody does, honestly, other than just they think people like it. You have to really ask yourself, am I innovating something here? Am I innovating something? In which case, you better be good at innovation if that's what you're good at. Or do I have a commodity here? In which case, you better be able to do it faster, stronger, and cheaper. Faster, cheaper, and easier to use. You have to be. So you got to figure out what your scaling proposition is. And you got to figure out what differentiates you. Because it's not enough to say, I'm just going to get it done. And I spent a long time in my life just saying, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to die trying. And I wish I had taken 10 or 15 of those years and just said, wait a second, before I die trying, should I even be doing this in the first place?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they're like tenacity, never quit. And in our company, I say, look, never quit unless it's stupid to be doing what you're doing, in which case quit. You got to step back, and you have to figure out, is this smart? Do I have the right strategy? Am I looking at the right things? And now let's make sure we don't give up and not quit and having great operational business. Yeah. But I didn't do that until I was 40 years old. So, I would have changed. I would have done things differently. I probably would have picked different spaces to be in. I would have played in different markets. I would have looked at value prop a lot differently. But, so that would be my biggest thing.
That's exceptional advice. And thank you for sharing it, because it's not easy lessons to learn.
No.
And so those of you who heard it and have the opportunity to skip some of the pain of those lessons, I would strongly encourage you take Eric up on it. But all right. So in just a second, I want to figure out how we can get folks connected to you and where they can find more about you. But before we get there, I want to have you take off your consultant hat for a moment, put on your entrepreneur CEO hat, And talk to us a little bit more. It's a great segue. Just the strategy, what you think is next for growth for you, particularly in your coaching and consulting business.
It's a great question. So ultimately, we are truly entrepreneurs. So when I go work with a client, or our companies go, our consultants go work with a client, we're just working with another entrepreneur who's likely having some type of challenges we are, depending on what phase of the journey they are. So our consulting company, I mean, I only know how to be very honest. Our companies are all in different phases that we own, and our consulting company is about I think we're about a $5 million business. Okay, so that's where we are, and we have goals to grow and all this other stuff. But to do that, we are working right now. We realize, we practice what we preach. So I look at it and, like, if we're operationally strong, our clients love us. We have very low churn. People stay with us for a very long time. That is not going to flywheel us into our numbers. It just won't. So we are currently working on what is the flywheel mechanism inside our business. The Jim Collins thing, 2 or 3 things that are going to work together in tandem to help spin up our business so that it spins and grows frictionlessly in the market. Yeah. So we're working on what are those 2 or 3 legs of the stool. They're going to get that flywheel going. Because we're growing at a rapid rate, but we're not going to grow at the rate that I look at our team's numbers. I look at those numbers and I'm like, yeah, I don't buy that. Like, we don't have the flywheel for that. So we're trying to build that flywheel and figure out what that is. Is it marketing mechanisms? Is it structure? Is it offerings in the market? What's going to make the market just say, I want that? And then we don't have to work as hard. So that's what we're working on. We're getting closer. We have some companies that we own. The consulting business is not one of them. I think in the consulting business, we have like one of the 3 legs of the stool right now. In our commercial painting business, actually, we almost have all 3 legs. They're starting to flywheel up. But our companies are in different phases. So the consulting business, though, oh yeah, we're obsessing over that problem right now.
Yeah. Wow. What a fantastic conversation, Eric. It was just an absolute delight having you on the show. Just an honor. I'm so glad you're here. To everyone who is listening, your time and attention mean the world to us. I hope you got as much out of this conversation as I did, and I cannot wait to see you next time. Take care.